You bought the spray, you bought the pellets, you bought the little yellow bottle that promised to end it all, and the bugs came back anyway. They always come back. 2 weeks apiece, then the holes in the leaves return, the slime trails, the chewed stems. The aphids stack like beads along the new growth. Meanwhile, in Japan, gardeners have been stopping these same pests for over 300 years. No spray, no pellets, no yellow bottle, just 2 cheap metals placed in the soil, left alone. Here's the claim, stated plainly. Certain garden pests cannot cross a barrier made of 2 common metals. Not because the metals poison them, because of something quieter, an electrical reaction so small you cannot feel it, but a slug feels it like a live wire. The Japanese have a word for this kind of defense. They call it a barrier that works without being watched. You said it once, it protects for years. And the most surprising part comes from a farming region near Kyoto, where this method was recorded in old household manuals long before anyone sold a single bottle of bug killer. That record was nearly lost. By the end of this, you will hold it. If you want to go even deeper into this kind of buried knowledge, the practices that were quietly left out of every product aisle and modern garden book, this is exactly what the book Ancient Roots was written for. It collects the home and garden methods that survived in private hands, passed down through households rather than sold in stores. Everything in this video is just one thread of what is inside. The book is linked in the description, and if what you are hearing right now is already changing how you think about your garden, the rest of it will go further. Ancient Roots. Find it in the description below. Now, let me start with the part almost no one gets right. The reason your pest problem keeps coming back, you have been taught to kill the bug. That is the whole Western approach. You see the pest, you reach for the poison, you kill what you can see. It feels satisfying, it feels like action. But here is the cost of that thinking. When you kill on contact, you only kill the ones present at that exact moment. The eggs survive. The ones hiding under the leaf survive. The ones still in the soil survive. And the spray breaks down in 3 to 7 days, depending on sun and rain. So you have bought yourself 1 week, maybe 2, then the next generation hatches into a garden with no defense at all. Because you killed the predators too. The spray does not know the difference between a slug and a ground beetle that eats slugs. It kills both. So you have removed your own free labor. This is why people end up spraying every single week, all season long. It is not because the product is weak. It is because the strategy is wrong. You are treating a flow of water by scooping with a cup instead of building a wall. The average homeowner spends between $80 and $200 a year on pest control products for a modest garden. Some spend far more. And at the end of the season, the soil is poorer, the helpful insects are gone, and the pests are exactly as numerous as the year before. Sometimes worse, because resistance builds. The survivors breed the next wave, and the next wave shrugs off the dose that killed their parents. So the real problem was never the bug. The real problem is that you have been buying a delay and calling it a solution. Now here is where the Japanese approach turns the whole thing around. Instead of killing what is present, you build a line the pest will not cross. You stop the invasion at the edge. You make the garden a place certain pests simply cannot enter. And the genius of it is that the barrier does not wear out in a week. It works in the rain. It works at night when slugs and snails do their real damage. It works while you sleep, while you travel, while you forget all about it. The 2 metals are copper and zinc. Copper you already know. It is the metal in old pennies, in pipes, in electrical wire. Zinc is the silvery coating on galvanized nails and buckets and fence wire. Both are cheap. Both last for years in soil. And when you place them correctly, something happens that no chemical spray can do. Let me explain the mechanism. Because once you understand it, you will never look at a copper strip the same way again. A slug and a snail move on a layer of wet slime. That slime is full of salts and moisture, which means it conducts electricity. Copper and zinc are 2 different metals with 2 different electrical potentials. When a moist conductor touches both metals at once, it completes a tiny circuit. Scientists call it a galvanic reaction. A very small electric current flows. You would never feel it. But the soft, wet foot of a slug feels it as a sharp, unpleasant jolt. The slug does not get electrocuted. It does not die. It simply turns around every time. It learns the edge of your bed is a wall it cannot pass, and it goes looking for an easier meal somewhere else. This is the difference between killing and repelling. A dead slug is replaced by next week's slug. A wall is a wall every single night. Now, a single strip of copper alone gives a weak version of this effect. The metal carries a slight charge against the moisture, and that is why you see copper tape sold for plant pots. It helps, but it is mild. And over time, the copper oxidizes and dulls, and the effect fades. Here is what the old Japanese growers understood that the copper tape sellers leave out. Two metals together, copper and zinc, create a far stronger and more reliable current than copper alone. The difference in potential between the two metals is what drives the reaction. One metal is a fence. Two metals is an electric fence. And it costs almost nothing to set up. So let me give you the practical version, the one you can build this weekend. Take a strip of copper. It can be copper tape, a thin copper sheet, or even a row of copper wire. Take a strip of galvanized metal, which is steel coated in zinc. A galvanized flashing strip from any hardware store works perfectly. You place them parallel close together around the edge of your raised bed or around the base of the plants you want to protect. The slug, crossing from soil onto your barrier, touches both at once through its wet body. Circuit complete, jolt delivered, retreat. For pots, you wrap a band of copper near the top rim and a band of galvanized wire just below it touching the rim. You have just built a complete defense for under $3, and it will outlast every plant you grow in that pot for the next decade. For a window box, run a copper strip along the front lip and a thin galvanized strip along the bottom edge. Slugs climb up the wall to reach a window box. They cannot complete the climb across two metals. The depth matters too. Push the lower edge of your metal an inch into the soil so nothing tunnels underneath. Leave an inch and a half standing above the surface so nothing simply reaches over. An inch under, an inch and a half above. That is the whole geometry. And here is the number that matters most. A copper and zinc barrier set up properly keeps working for 5 to 10 years. Copper does not rot. Zinc weathers slowly. Compare that to a spray that lasts 5 to 7 days. You are trading a weekly chore for a one-time afternoon. Now, before you go further, let me say something clearly about slug pellets, because the internet is full of bad advice on this one. The blue pellets, the ones in every garden center, most of them contain a compound that does kill slugs, yes. But it also draws them out into the open in large numbers, and it does not break down cleanly. Pets are attracted to the pellets. Birds eat the poison slugs. Hedgehogs and toads, the very animals that would eat 50 slugs a night for free, get sick or die from eating the contaminated bodies. You are not just killing slugs. You are killing the entire system that was holding the slugs in check. And there is the newer pellet, the iron-based one, sold as safe. It is safer for pets. That part is true. But here is what they do not put on the front of the box. It still kills your earthworms when used heavily, because the chelating agent that carries the iron is toxic to them. And earthworms are the engine of healthy soil. Lose your worms in your soil compacts, drains poorly, and grows weaker plants which attract more pests. You solve the slug and create the next problem. Honestly, just skip the pellets. A copper and zinc barrier does the same job without poisoning the animals that work for you for free and without emptying the bottle every 2 weeks. Build the wall once. Let the toads and beetles handle the stragglers. Now you might be thinking, this all sounds fine for someone with a big garden and a workshop full of tools. But what if you only have a balcony, a few pots by the back door, a small patch by the kitchen window? This next part is built exactly for you. In fact, small spaces are where this method shines brightest, because the smaller the area, the cheaper and faster the barrier. If all you have is a single tomato plant in a pot, you need about 2 feet of copper tape and 2 feet of galvanized wire. That is it. Wrap the copper around the upper third of the pot. Twist the galvanized wire into a loose ring just below it, touching the rim. You have just built a complete defense for under $3, and it will outlast every plant you grow in that pot for the next decade. For a window box, run a copper strip along the front lip and a thin galvanized strip along the bottom edge. Slugs climb up the wall to reach a window box. They cannot complete the climb across two metals. And here is a trick for the truly tool-free. Old copper coins and galvanized washers. Lay a tight ring of copper coins around the base of a precious seedling, then a ring of galvanized washers just outside them, the two rings nearly touching. A slug crossing that double ring gets the same jolt as one crossing an expensive copper sheet. People in apartments have protected entire balcony gardens with a jar of old coins and a bag of washers from a junk drawer. No land, no power tools, no new purchase. Just two metals and a little geometry. That is the whole secret, scaled to fit a windowsill. But let me widen this out, because copper and zinc do more than stop slugs, and this is where it gets genuinely useful for the rest of your garden. Aphids. Those soft green clusters that crush the new growth and curl the leaves. They are drawn to plants that are weak and over-fertilized. Plants pushing soft, sappy, nitrogen-rich growth. Here is the connection most people miss. Zinc and copper are not just barrier metals. They are trace minerals that plants need in tiny amounts to build strong cell walls and natural defenses. A plant with the right trace minerals grows firmer tissue. Firmer tissue is harder for a piercing, sucking insect to feed on. The Japanese growers near Kyoto understood, in their own practical language, that a strong plant is its own pesticide. They did not have the chemistry words. They had 300 years of watching which plants got eaten and which did not. A tiny amount of zinc in the soil, released slowly from a buried galvanized nail or strip, feeds the plant exactly what it needs to toughen up. Not a flood, a trickle. The same barrier that repels the slug above the soil is quietly fortifying the plant below it. One setup, two jobs. This is the layered thinking that the spray and kill approach can never match, because a poison only ever does one thing, and then it is gone. Now I want to take you to the source, because this is the part that was nearly buried. In the farming districts around Kyoto and into the Nara region, there were household manuals passed down through families, hand-copied records of how to run a home and a garden through the seasons. These were not published books for sale. They were private knowledge, the kind of thing a grandmother handed to a daughter. Inside them were entries on protecting vegetables from what they called the night eaters, the slugs and snails that did their damage in darkness and vanished by morning. The remedy recorded in several of these was the placement of copper and what they described as the gray metal, the zinc-coated iron that came into wider use as the country industrialized. Strips of it were set around the precious crops, the leafy greens and the young rice seedlings in their nursery beds, where a single night of slugs could ruin a season. Now here is the part that turns this from a tip into buried knowledge. When commercial pest products arrived, this quiet practice was pushed aside almost overnight. Why would a company sell you a strip of metal that lasts 10 years when it could sell you a bottle you buy again every spring? The metal barrier was not banned. It did not need to be. It was simply left out of the new books, the new advertisements, the new garden centers. It survived only in the families that kept doing it, in the old manuals folded away in drawers, in the gardens of people too practical to pay for the same problem twice. A handful of researchers later confirmed exactly what those manuals described. Studies on slug and snail behavior found that a galvanic barrier, two dissimilar metals, repelled the animals far more reliably than a single metal alone, and that the effect held up in wet conditions where chemical barriers wash away. The science caught up to the grandmother. It usually does. So the knowledge existed. It was set aside on purpose because it could not be sold twice. A few households preserved it, and now it is in your hands this weekend for the price of a coffee. Let me give you the deeper principle at work here, because this is bigger than slugs. The Japanese have a concept that runs through their gardening, their carpentry, their entire way of maintaining a home. The idea is that the best defense is built into the structure itself, not applied on top of it from a bottle. You see it in the way traditional houses are built to breathe and resist rot without paint sealing them shut. You see it in the way a garden is shaped so that water flows where it should without machines. And you see it here in a barrier that becomes a permanent part of the bed, working without supervision, asking nothing of you after the first afternoon. The Western habit is to react. The pest appears, you respond, you spray, you repeat. It keeps you busy and it keeps you buying. The Japanese habit is to prevent. You build a condition in which the problem cannot occur, and then you let the garden take care of itself. One approach treats your time and money as something to be spent over and over. The other treats them as something to be invested once. Build the wall once. Sleep every night after. Set the metal. Forget the bottle. There is one more layer to this, and it is the piece that the old Kyoto records hint at, but most modern guides have completely lost. It is about timing and about a second pest. Most people never connect to metal at all. Cutworms. Those fat gray caterpillars that live in the top inch of soil and chew through a young stem at ground level, dropping a healthy seedling in a single night. They cause the heartbreak of walking out in the morning to find a row of plants lying flat, cut clean as if with scissors. People blame everything from rabbits to the weather. It is cutworms, almost always. Here's what the old practice did about them and why it works. A collar, a simple band of metal pushed an inch into the soil around the stem, rising 2 inches above it. The cutworm traveling through the top of the soil hits the buried metal and cannot pass. It cannot reach the stem. And when that collar is copper, there is the added bite of the metal itself against the soft body of the caterpillar. The Japanese growers use thin metal collars around their most vulnerable transplants for exactly this reason. A young plant has 1 week window, the first 2 or 3 weeks after it goes in the ground. Protect it through that window and it grows past the danger. The collar can come up and move to the next seedling. One piece of metal, protecting plant after plant, year after year. This is the timing wisdom the manuals carried. They knew that pests are not a constant. They come in waves tied to moisture, to warmth, to the life cycle of the insect. You do not need to defend every plant all the time. You need to defend the right plant at the right moment. A young transplant in damp spring soil is a feast waiting to happen. A tough established plant in summer barely needs you. Defend the young. Ignore the strong, watch the damp, relax in the dry. Slugs and cutworms both need moisture and darkness. They feed hardest in wet weather and at night. So the smartest growers walk their gardens at dusk after rain, the exact moment of maximum risk, and that is when a barrier earns its keep. Your metal does that walk for you. It stands guard at dusk, after rain, while you are inside having dinner. Now let me put real numbers on the whole thing, because this is where the choice becomes obvious. To set up a copper and zinc barrier around a typical raised bed, you need copper tape or thin copper strip and a length of galvanized flashing or wire. For one bed, expect to spend somewhere between $8 and $15. That barrier lasts conservatively 5 to 10 years. Spread across its life, you are paying somewhere between $1 and $3 per year to protect that bed. And it works in the rain, at night, while you sleep, with no refilling, no mixing, no spraying. Now compare that to the mainstream path. The average gardener spends $80 to $200 a year on sprays and pellets every year, forever. Over 10 years, that is $800 to $2,000. And at the end of it, your soil is weaker, your worms are fewer, your helpful predators are gone, and your pests are just as numerous as the day you started. You rented a solution that never finished. A copper and zinc barrier at a couple of dollars a year against a chemical habit at over $100 a year with poorer soil to show for it. That is the comparison. That is the whole video in one line. Here is your simple routine to start this weekend. On Saturday, measure the edges of the beds or pots you most want to protect by your copper and your galvanized strip. On Sunday, push the lower edge an inch into the soil, leave an inch and a half standing proud, and make sure your two metals sit close enough that a crossing slug touches both. For your youngest transplants, cut short collars and ring each stem. Then walk away. Check it once in spring and once in autumn. Wipe any heavy grime off the copper so it stays active. That is the entire maintenance. 2 checks a year against 52 weeks of spraying. The deeper lesson here is not really about slugs or copper or even gardening. It is about a way of thinking. The modern world taught you to solve problems by buying something that runs out so that you would come back and buy it again. The Japanese household tradition solved problems by building conditions that do not run out. One mindset keeps you dependent, the other makes you free. And the difference is not in how hard you work. It is in whether your work compounds or evaporates. A spray evaporates in a week. A wall compounds for 10 years. The companies that sell the bottle are shaped by one thing: the need to sell you the bottle again. The household that builds the barrier is shaped by something completely different: the simple wish to never deal with a problem twice. One is a business of repetition. The other is a craft of prevention. Once you see the difference, you cannot unsee it. You will walk down the garden aisle and see shelves of bottles designed to be emptied, and you will know that a strip of metal in a drawer at home outlasts every one of them. So this season, before you reach for the spray, reach for the two metals instead. Set the barrier once. Protect the young plants through their weak window. Let the toads and beetles you saved do the cleanup. And watch what happens to a garden that is finally defended at the edge instead of poisoned in the middle. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which pest has been beating you the most this year. Is it slugs leaving silver trails across your hostas, snails hollowing out your strawberries, or cutworms dropping your seedlings overnight? Tell me which one, and tell me whether you are going to try the copper and zinc barrier or the coin and washer ring. I read these, and the answers help shape what comes next. And if you want the rest of this buried knowledge, the practices the product aisle quietly left out, stay with this channel. We are recovering the home and garden methods that were simplified away, one technique at a time. Next, we are opening up something even older. A single kitchen ingredient the Japanese used to keep ants out of the house for an entire summer, without a single trap or chemical, just by understanding the one trail they cannot follow. It works on the same principle you just learned. Stop them at the edge, and you never fight them in the middle. Set the metal, forget the bottle. And once you see the difference, you will never go back to the weekly spray again. Remember this: the strongest garden is not the one sprayed the most. It is the one defended at the edge, built once, and left to do its quiet work for years. You stayed all the way through, and I'm glad. Inside the circle, I pick up right where this stopped and walk you through the complete copper zinc barrier build for your soil. And if a question comes up, ask me directly. A real person answers, never a machine. You'll belong among thousands just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on your screen. You can cancel anytime, one click, no risk.